We are live once again for Live Below Zero. We're talking with Andy and Denise. Hi, Andy. Where's Denise?
Hey, Joe. Good to see you. Denise is out running dogs, but I'm expecting her back any second now.
How's it going there? How's the weather? Is it looks cold a little bit, windy?
No, we've had a lot of wind. It's been a super mild winter here and not a lot of snow. Super warm right now. This is the kind of weather we have at the end of March, not the beginning. So it's been kind of a little bit unusual for us this year.
Where are the dogs? Where are you now? What part of your property? I know people are somewhat familiar with your property.
Yeah, so I'm here, let me just flip around here. I'm kind of over by our dog lot right now, and you can see our house in the background. You can see I just finished the porch and everything. So the dream home is now complete. It's been many years. He did a lot of filming while we were building the dream home, various additions, but it's pretty much complete now with the porch and the woodshed. And I expect to see Denise any moment now. She was out running dogs. We've been putting a lot of miles on the dogs this winter. They probably have over 1,500 miles on them, and we take turns getting out and running them. You can't see me right now. I'll get back over here. Let's see.
We see it's a beautiful day, though.
You see me now?
We do.
Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, no, it's everything's going really good this winter. It's been, like I said, really mild, and I've been spending a lot of time on the sled, and Denise has been spending a lot of time on the sled. So it's been just a really enjoyable winter for us. Kind of nice that it hasn't been super cold this year. And I guess you'd say a lot of our winter has been life above zero this year, not life below zero.
It looks like a crystal clear, beautiful day out there, like amazing.
It's spectacular. We're entering my favorite month of the year. I've always loved March. That's March and April are my two favorite months of the year. We have winter conditions for getting around, but it's pretty easy to get around and it's warm and the crystal clear and the northern lights have been out a lot the last couple of weeks here. So it's been a pretty spectacular spring so far.
I mean, you've lived there for a very long time. Do you still appreciate it? Like, I mean, every night you look up and is it look and feel amazing?
Yeah, I mean, you know how it is when you do something for a long time, sometimes you get a little complacent, but one of the things that I've always loved about living here is when people do come to visit or whatever, they're pretty jazzed about everything here. And so it kind of reinvigorates me as far as, realizing what a special place we have to live in and how spectacular it is here, both scenery and climate and northern lights, all of that, kind of get sparked when we do have company here, which isn't too often, but when it happens, it's really nice. Whenever the crew was coming in to film, it was always kind of like having family come back, and it was all about just experiencing Calico Bluff.
And I'm sure now, like with Denise, obviously she's lived there for a while, but like we've seen on the show, you've been able to sort of see the world, your world, anew through her eyes, and that probably has been a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Like she's a pretty special person, pretty unique, super. Oh, here she comes. Oh, there she is. Hey, boys. There's Denise. Yeah,
That's
no, she's been just a great partner to have out here. She's so into doing everything that we do out here and loves the dogs. I think the dogs are more her dogs now than they were my dogs. But you know, I couldn't ask for a better partner. She's hardworking, smart, creative. Everything about our partnership just seems to really happen effortlessly here. And you got a good thing when that kind of relationship's happening. Come on over and say hi.
what are we
Hi.
seeing? Hi, oh hi, Denise.
Here's a big purple marshmallow.
I know, right? I saw something down in the dog lot and I kind of slowed down coming in. I was like, what? Oh, Sandy. Hello.
Hi, Denise. Once you get comfortable, you might have to come closer for us to hear you.
Okay, hello. I'll
Much
tell you what
better.
I'll do, Joe. I'll go reset up the camera and maybe let you talk with Denise a little bit, and then maybe I'll do some unhooking of dogs while you talk to her, and we'll jump back in and back and forth and up until the time we get the dogs put away, and so that'll just take a minute or two.
Yeah, or I can go and hook them, whatever you want to do.
Yeah,
That
I'll
sounds
get 'em.
great.
Okay, stand by. I'm gonna move everybody.
Okay.
Hold on. So let's do a little.
There they are.
Let's do a little dog thing here for everybody. There's Hulk. Hulk is now our
Great lead dog.
yeah, he's doing a really good job as far as being a leader now. And Zorro has been put in the back temporarily.
Yes.
We got big old Rockman and Grizz. Grizz is still leading when we need him, but we're training young dogs. And there's Sketch and Zorro.
Sketch is the mama dog of them all. She's running with them like a pro.
It's a little bit hot outside right now for them. You know, they kind of like it when it's 0 to 10 below 0. And we're up in the 30s today.
Yeah,
So,
good job, Dancer.
and there's big old Goat. That's Denise's partner when she's out running out in the woods.
That's the goat runner, and that's Amos. They're the work dogs in the back.
All right. So there's my big purple girl. I'm gonna go stop the camera and then you can talk with her some, okay?
Okay.
Okay, hang on.
There we go. You know, it's that time of year, Joe, where we just hate to be inside at all. We pretty much try and spend as much of our time outside right now as we possibly can after a long winter of, you know, just kind of being a little bit more homebound. It's really nice to see the weather get warm and get out. We're cutting our firewood for the year, and I'll be cutting logs for billing. And so we're into kind of our springtime mode, which is a really busy mode for us, but it's a fun time of year for us.
How much daylight do you have currently?
Oh man, it's getting light around, we start to see it getting light around 6 in the morning, and it's not getting dark until what, about 8 now, 7:38?
About 7:30.
Yeah, so
Every day is.
yeah, we're gaining 6 minutes a day right now. So pretty dramatic shift.
I like the camera facing this way because I can see who I'm talking to.
Yeah.
It's me.
No. Okay, go on hook dogs, Andy.
Yes, ma'am. The boss has spoken.
There
Talk loud.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Hi,
now?
Denise. Where were you
Hi,
at?
Joe. Where am I at?
No, where were you with the dogs?
Oh, I ran down to what we call the 70-mile slough. So it's the river crossing, the Yukon River crossing. I go out across Ford Lake, up the notorious Ford Lake Hill, down the other side, through the woods trail, high speed, and then run through the sloughs out to the river. It's not that long of a run, but it's a good one, especially on a day like today. Like Andy said, it's a little bit warm for the dogs. So got to give them breaks, and staying in the woods is cooler for them.
I know you have some background in the woods, but did you ever think that you'd be running dogs?
Absolutely not. That has actually been a real high point for me. And my very first, well, you would know from the very first dog mushing expedition didn't really go that well. It kind of ended with a big black eye and the rest of it. There's been some humps and bumps, but that's been a really exciting, rewarding skill that I've learned here.
And this is quite a departure, I think, from being a nurse in Florida. Do you still do nursing, or are you retired? People are asking.
No, I still do. I just have my foot in the door. So I just do a couple times a year. I go down to Florida. So it's a very different world in every single way. Very different than dog mushing up here. And it's just for a brief time, just really to keep myself active in it. And then I'm right back here.
And what do you find like the major differences? You know, I mean, obviously you're in two completely different environments, right? An emergency room and then Calico. I mean, it's kind of obvious, but like, what are the biggest differences you find between those two mentally?
Actually, I don't know about the differences. It's more like the similarities. Being able to think quickly, adapt to situations, different things thrown at you all the time. I think that my professional background has really prepared me for this environment. And it's prepared me in the way that so many times here, there's just, you think you've got it, you've got that skill, you've done it 100 times, and there's something about it that's a twist and it just unnerves you. And it's like, okay, I got this, I could do this, or something completely different. And how to navigate that, how to just go through something, what to do. I have a whole crowd around me here. I don't know if you can see them now.
I see some dogs, yes.
How to just break it down and focus on what needs to be done, like in a real sort of trauma situation. Things that go wrong sometimes here where, okay, focus, you just need that laser focus, that confidence, that go forward. So I think the two go tandem quite well. They go hand in hand, the two worlds.
When you're ever in Calico, do you ever think like, oh man, what did I do? I'm living out here now. Or is it, usually like, oh man, I can't believe I get to live out here.
Yeah, it's more that. Zorro's trying to get camera time here. Yeah, I catch myself and have to really just take a look around, and it just grabs me that this is real. This is a world that opened up to me, and I just am forever grateful that I was able to have that door open, and then just the confidence to go for it, because it was kind of against a lot of the flow at the time.
And
And a lot of the advice of people.
people are asking, so let's talk about that. Like, how did you guys meet? And then I know we've talked about that on the show, but not just how did you meet and then talk about that transition to moving out there? Was it a hard choice? And talk about how you went from a nurse in Florida to living in the wilds of Alaska.
Right, right. It started with a Boy Scout trip. I know I've told the story. It was a Boy Scout canoe trip down the Yukon River, and I was one of the adults helping lead the group down the river. And the Alaskan side of it had arranged for a stop at a homestead on the river of a guy named Andy Bassich, who homesteaded out here. And as I was coming more into this terrain, we were coming down the river, I thought, wow, who could actually live out here? I don't believe it, because permafrost, maybe he's here just seasonally, but he couldn't live out here. And we came to the property, and he was going to give us a tour. Actually, I have to back up because that wasn't the first time I saw him. He came over to get us where we were camping because we were late. And he had stuff to do. So he's like, come on, guys, you want this tour? You get on with it. So he came over where we were camping, and he had a couple dogs on the boat. He pulled up with the boat. The dogs jumped off the boat, and they just peed all over the Boy Scout gear. And that just cracked me up, and that was Andy. And then when we came up to the property here, up to the homestead, and he was giving us a tour around, it was just more and more. It was sinking in. Oh, this is legit. He actually does live here. This is for real. Yeah. So that's how we met. And it was just kind of one of those things that instantly I knew that I needed to come back here, that this was very, very special in every way, in the Andy way, and just everything about it. The more I got up into Alaska, the getting onto the river, the more into the interior we went. I just was feeling it it just was compounded. Just a feeling that I was going into the right place. This was all worth it. There's something that's just meant to be. There was a lot of challenges in getting me to that point of the trip. And it just all started to make sense that there was a reason.
Now you want to hear my version?
Yeah. Yes.
My version is the same as hers up until the time the dogs peed on all the gear. I thought that was hilarious. They had it all piled up on the beach, getting ready to go, and
That was
the two
so
dogs.
funny.
The boat hit the beach, and the dogs jumped off and peed on everything. And then when they got here,
Well, I think that's when we probably first connected because we were the only two laughing
Yeah.
at that situation.
yeah, that was my first time I saw Denise. She was laughing really hard when the dogs were peeing all over their gear. The good old farm girl that she is, she understood that. But then they came here, and when I was giving them the tours, she was really quiet. She didn't say much. She was just taking a lot of pictures with her camera. She was really into a lot of photography at that point in time with her 35 millimeter. I guess it'd be a SLR digital now.
Yeah.
But anyway, she was just very quiet. But I kept kind of glancing over, checking her out. I was thinking, hey, that's a pretty hot looking Girl Scout or Boy Scout. And then at the very end, we had all the boys. I was living in my other house at the time. I was building this house. I was just starting the second story of the dream home. And I had all the Boy Scouts in the dog lot, petting the dogs and giving them treats. And she came over and just started talking. And we had a nice conversation. And she kind of let me know that they would prefer to camp. She would prefer to camp here for the night instead of going downriver, but the leader had different ideas. And then about, maybe 2 weeks after she got home, she just emailed me. We exchanged emails then because she told me she had some pictures she wanted to send me. And then she emailed me and we emailed back and forth a few times. And then I was like, well, give me your phone number. Let's talk, and it just kind of evolved from there. And by
That was in July. By October, I was back.
Yeah, and then in,
So,
in late
it was-
September, I said, well, why don't you come up for a visit? And she flew up and
I think I said, do you want me to come up for a visit?
yeah. So anyway, it was all meant to be. I guess
That's
it's
amazing. So Denise, basically for your first date, you flew 20 hours basically to get from Florida to that's a long first date.
Yeah,
It is.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
it's-
commercial flight alone is
about 12 hours.
about 12
It's a
hours
really good connection from Tampa to
to
Fairbanks.
Fairbanks. And then that's when the travel really begins because you have to get aligned with the mail plane that flies into Everett's Air, that flies into Eagle, and hope that they fly. And Andy, I had no idea about any of that. And Andy kept telling me these things like Monday to Friday, weather permitted, they might have a seat and wait and all this stuff. And then I figured it out
Yeah,
and then you get to after getting to Eagle, there's the whole journey down here still.
yeah, and we flew you in on that first trip.
Mhm,
So
with
the
Gary.
lake was frozen. It was late enough in the season that the lake was frozen. I think it was end of October, early November.
Right.
And the lake was frozen. So I hired a guy kind of in the community that had a super cub, and he packed her into the back and landed on the
Like
lake.
literally did.
And yeah,
Very different than any kind of travel that I'd done before. And
Yeah.
definitely.
That's an incredible first date. When you were there, and I know you went back and forth, and as you started to be there, people are asking some questions. They're asking like, were you nervous? What did your family think? How did was it like you knew you wanted to stay? Did your family ever come visit? People sort of just are asking the logistics about that kind of life, that transition.
Yeah.
tell them what the nurses said to you when you told.
Yeah, a lot of people advised me strongly, do not go.
They basically told her that she was going to get locked into a root cellar and that nobody would ever see her again.
And it was kind of bad because that was the first time when I came back and I was all black and blue from my first dog mushing expedition.
Yeah. Her first trip out to Ford Lake, she schmucked into a tree pretty good, and her dog team came out on the lake. I was with my team on the lake, and her dog team came out with no Denise on the back. And I waited for a few minutes. Luckily, I was able to stop her team. And then she came staggering out of the woods and walked up to me, and her face was all bloody. Her nose was bleeding.
It was pretty bad.
It was actually a pretty bad smack into a tree. And
I had a lot of explaining to do when I got back.
Yeah.
There was a lot of, I told you it was going to be ugly. I told you.
And
Yeah.
you know what, Joe?
Oh, good.
That's exactly when I knew she was a good partner to have in the bush, because I said, let's turn around and go back. I want to get you cleaned up. And she's like, no, I think I'll be okay. And I said, well, are you dizzy? And she said, a little bit, but not too bad. I think I
bad.
can go on. And so we finished doing our mush. And then when we came back, she got cleaned up and toughed it out. And I thought, man, I don't even know if I would have.
flew out the next day. I had to leave the next day.
Okay.
That was those were short trips. It was kind of crazy because I was working full time. So I would work a bunch of days and then take a block of days off. And in my days off, zoom up here quick and then zoom back and don't be late. So it was absolutely a juggle. A lot of people really thought I was losing my mind. But a lot of people around me, but everybody, the closer into knowing me, the more they understood. And because I just felt really okay with it, very confident with it, that this was just something that I had to explore. And I just kept saying, I don't know where it's going or what's going to happen. And it might just be go up and come back and that's it. But whatever it is, I need to go explore it and find out what it is. And it's almost 9 years later.
whoa, that's wild. It's been 9 years.
Right.
That's amazing. What,
Yeah.
An additional element to, you're living, you go out to this crazy location in the middle of nowhere, and then also, wait a minute, they're filming a TV show there.
Right.
Were you nervous about the cameras that were around sometimes?
No, and at first I wasn't being filmed. I was behind the scenes, just staying invisible. And I was actually really intrigued with it because I've always loved photography. I've traveled. Photography has just been a real integral part of everything I've done. And
She was that big.
and I just like to see how it happened. And the crew from those very first days were always very welcoming and open and just showing me how things worked. And that was really intriguing to me.
Yeah, and they're
I
really
love that. And they were mentors. They really, if I wanted to pick up a camera and experiment or play with it, they were all about it. So even taking some of the stills and
I gotta say, Joe, one of the things, this is kind of a shout out to all the crews that came out here, but one thing that really impressed me is the level of professionalism that all these camera operators and producers and DIT guys all had. It was really, it's something that I've always been interested in as well, but I was always really impressed with the level of professionalism, how good they were at what they did. And they were definitely, or I shouldn't say they were,
I was going to say,
they are top-notch film producers. And that was another part of the aspect of Light Below Zero that we really love. We got to know so many of those people so well. Many of them came back time and time again. And so it almost became like a kind of a second family almost at certain points of time with some of the crew that came back. And so that was a pretty special part of what really made it fun, actually, was having people returning and continuing our relationship, building that relationship with them. Quite frankly, I kind of miss that. We don't have a lot of visitors here. We live pretty, even though we're not a great distance away from the town of Eagle, we live very solitary. We don't see people here hardly at all. A little bit during the hunting season, And maybe this time of year, there might be a few people that'll snow machine kind of past here, but for the most part,
There's
we don't see
nobody.
anybody. So that was kind of a nice part of having them coming, 4 times, 5 times a year or whatever. And quite frankly, it seems a little bit
Well,
strange not having them here.
and you think about it they were here before me. And there were a lot of times when I was asking them, well, where's this or how's this work? And they would, show me, or they just, like Andy said, we're part of the network here. And that's just how it's always been for me here. And just the way they embraced the lifestyle, even though it fascinated me, like Andy said, how professional they were, but how I always would want to know where they came from. Where were you 24 hours ago? And the very different life that they have everywhere else around the world, really. And how they adapted to our lifestyle here, how they embraced it, how they were all about
Very
being,
respectful.
yeah, respectful, but
Yeah.
about really understanding it
Yeah.
so that they could truly capture it.
Yeah.
And for me, so many things that I did for the first time was with the crew. It was all, and they were always very, very tolerant, because there was definitely the blunders and mistakes, but they were there for all those firsts, so many of them. I can just, so it's hard it's definitely a void in a lot of ways. And like even now mushing is such a beautiful day. I was thinking, man, they would have these GoPros mounted and they would just be capturing us all of this. There's just so many aspects that they really were part of here.
Yeah. Bottom line, it was a really positive experience for us here. And we still stay in touch with those people from time to time. And I was, cleaning out an old computer of photos, and I was finding pictures of some of the very first crew that ever came here. And, that was 10, 12 years ago, 12 years ago, I guess now. So
That's amazing. Denise, did you watch Life Below Zero before you came up there at all?
No, I did not. And when the Boy Scout guys, the Boy Scout troop from Fairbanks was telling us that we're going to go to Andy Bassett's place, and they said, he's on Life Below Zero. I was on, and I had never heard of it. I was like, Life Below what? What are you talking about?
She's not a TV person,
So
Joe. She's on the shooting side of it, not the watching side of it.
People are asking, speaking of TV, do you guys watch TV? What do you like? What kind of stuff do you watch? I know now that you have satellite, it's a little easier, but do you watch TV, or is it,
Yeah, I mean, we like watching movies. We like watching, different series, and we'll spend time in the evening. We basically, our lifestyle is we get up very early in the morning, sometimes 4 or 5 in the morning, and we drink coffee and look out the window and watch the sun come up. But that's our morning time together. And then
it doesn't come up in the winter until what time?
but then, we get dressed and have our breakfast, and then we go separate ways during the day. And Denise is off doing her things, and I'm off doing my things. And then we reconnect at dinner time. And then, we spend our evenings together, and we'll get back by the TV, sit in bed and eat dinner. And that's where we reconnect again. So, we're both really independent people, but we also, share a lot of that time together too. But I think at the core, both of us are kind of solitary. So it's kind of a nice mix, because we both accept and acknowledge that the other person likes their free time, their alone time. And then we really enjoy being together too, and sharing what this life has for us out here, which is pretty unique and pretty special.
That's
It
awesome.
made a big difference with the internet connection now, as far as, movie watching. The box of the old movies is where.
Yeah. Starlink has really changed living in the bush. I'll tell you, when I first came out here in the early 80s, people that lived way out in the bush, wrote letters, and whoever was going by would carry that letter to Eagle and mail it. And sometimes they'd only get mail once a year. And one of the unwritten rules whenever I went downriver, because I was kind of learning, I was a total greenhorn, I was learning. So I would go spend time with some of these guys and families that lived out in the bush. And the unwritten rule was if you came, you better bring the mail with you, because that was their only contact with the outside world. None of them had power. None of them had any kind of radios or anything. So, in the last 35 years since I moved here, it's really changed living out in the bush. The amount of amenities you have and conveniences, and especially communications. It was never like that. When I used to go trapping, when I first came out and first started dog mushing, I would leave Eagle at the end of September, early October, and I wouldn't see another human being until after New Year's. And I was fine with that. But everybody was like, well, you should take a radio out there in case you get hurt. And I was like, well, it's my choice to go out. And if I get into trouble, it's up to me to get out of it. I don't want other people risking their lives because I'm a dumbass, But it was a very different world is what I'm getting at. And in some ways, I kind of think it was a better world because you didn't spend time or freak out if the internet went down. And you just stayed a little bit more connected with the land because you didn't have all those sorts of things distracting you. But I got to say, when you get a little bit older, having those conveniences is pretty nice.
One thing, Joe, that kind of gets glossed over though, and I just got to interject with it. Yes, the internet is amazing, but it doesn't just happen. Andy doesn't seem to realize how much back work goes into it, because you have to consider where we are. There's no, what are you crinkling? He's got crinkling something. There's no power. There's nothing here. So to make internet happen, all of that has to go into play. I mean, you have to have the power to make the internet happen. How do you get the power? You have to generate the power. So then you get a solar system and battery storage. You have to keep sheds warm. You have to have so many skills all tiered and built up one on another to make that internet happen. So it's not like, internet just fell out of the sky and landed here. There's a lot to be said. It is a remote location. And when internet goes down, it's not like call up the guys and say, come fix the internet. We have a wire down or whatever.
God help the electrician that's going to try and figure out how I wired everything.
And then, yeah, it's a little bit magical. And then also the other factor is with the internet is the environment, the conditions. It's good now when temperatures are okay and there's nothing covering the dish, but when it's cold and that dish takes power to turn, and it's so cold that as it's melting the moisture off of it and freezing, it shuts down. So, there's snow cover over it, and there's a lot of things in keeping it up. So, and it definitely, sometimes sometimes it's just not happening.
And let's talk a little bit about, you talk about isolation out there. Let's talk about the people that you do have around, which are the dogs. People are asking just generally some thoughts about the dogs. People are asking if there is an update on Topaz. And then people are asking generally just about your connection to the dogs and what it's like having the dogs out there for both of you.
Kids.
The dogs are our family here.
Yeah.
It's a very unique relationship. They're very much part of everything we do. It's been a little bit of a tough year or so.
It's been a tough lot of years because we lost all of our fishing opportunities. So keeping a dog team out in a remote area is becoming extremely expensive and very difficult. But to get back to your update, we lost Topaz this winter. She finally passed away. I think it was December. She basically passed away in her sleep inside the house. with me. Denise was down in Tampa for some work, but and we lost Schilling this year, and we lost Krugerrand this year. Those two were brothers. And then we also lost Gambo, who I don't
Just
think he really
recently.
filmed a lot of Gambo except for in the very early years.
Gamble.
He was a kind of an odd dog, but we lost him. So we lost quite a few of our old timers. We have 2 old timers left, and then the 9 working dogs that we have now.
I think what's really different, we had that group of old timers and, they were all had their things and being catered to, coming in sometimes at night and everything. But as they were aging out and we would lose them before this period in time where we don't have the resources to provide for them, that we would have other puppies coming in. So it was all part of the cycle. It seemed a lot more fluid, and it's always a hard thing when you lose one of the old guys. And then there's always the regeneration, and we don't have that now. So that puts a different feel to it, because we're going down in numbers.
I always talked about bush economics, Joe, and the sad thing about what's happening with our salmon fisheries in Alaska is that it's changing the bush economics for people who want to live in the woods without machinery and want to utilize dogs. It's just really tough to do it now. You have to buy dog food, and it used to be we bought a little bit of dog food, but we fished for 3 weeks in the fall, and the dogs had great food, and we don't have that anymore. So it's really a big adjustment for me. That was one of my favorite things to do, was fishing with a fish wheel and catching the food we need, because our whole life here is built on sustainability, taking care of ourselves, not needing the outside world. And so we kind of need the outside world to feed our dogs now. And that's a big change and a big adaptation for me.
Talk a little bit about that. And people are very interested in the fish wheel. I remember early on, getting the chance to come out there and seeing the fish wheel in action was pretty much one of the coolest things I've seen in Alaska. Obviously, that's been a major change since the show has started. I know it's something you're very passionate about in terms of management, but maybe just a general quick-ish conversation about the salmon on the Yukon and why you can't fish with a fish wheel anymore.
Yeah, so our salmon have been collapsing. The chum salmon, which we relied on for our dogs, this past year's run was the lowest ever recorded. It was only 16,000 fish that crossed the border near Eagle into Canada, and our escapement goals are normally 80 to 105,000 fish. So they've crashed dramatically. And the king salmon have crashed dramatically to the point where they've created kind of a moratorium where we're not allowed to fish for king salmon. So basically we have 0 salmon fishing, and we've had 0 salmon fishing now for 5 years in our region. And the Yukon River is kind of the artery of life through interior of Alaska. It's what provides sustenance for people. And losing salmon is across the board for every person who lives along this river has been absolutely devastating. There's a lot of reasons why they're crashing. Some gets blamed on climate change. There's no doubt that's changing out in the marine environment. But primarily from my perspective, it's heavy industry, heavy fishing, and in particular, hatcheries are overproducing fish into the marine environment. So all species, not just salmon, all species in the Bering Sea are now getting smaller at adult age. There's a pretty dramatic change in size of fish. And basically what a lot of scientists believe is that the Bering Sea is at its carrying capacity is at its limits right now. So there's not enough food for the fish that are out there right now, due to the super heavy hatchery production in the US and Canada, Russia, Korea, and Japan. So it's a huge issue. A lot of people are sticking their heads in the sand and denying it because they want to keep the industry going. From my perspective, and I'm heavily involved in management decisions internationally and in the state, in my opinion, hatcheries are our biggest issue that we're dealing with. So if you want to help people living on the Yukon River, don't buy imitation crab or any of those imitation foods, because that's made out of pollock. That's the trawl industry, and anything that's labeled wild caught is hatchery fish. It's not wild fish. And we're trying to bring back and save the wild fish throughout Alaska. And it's not just the Yukon River. So it's a big issue and it's impacting a lot of people.
And it's not the people living along the Yukon River, but it's the whole ecosystem here.
Yeah.
It's everything living along the Yukon River.
Yeah.
Wild caught is hatchery caught?
Hatchery produced.
Hatchery produced. So it was a big labeling thing. We tried to get it banned, but the US Congress, of course, is in the pockets of big industry, and they allowed that labeling to happen. We tried to get it stopped, but basically if it says wild caught, that just means that the fish was caught and out in the marine environment, but those are all hatchery fish. Before that, they had to label them as hatchery or farmed fish. And so you knew what you were getting, but they allowed that labeling of wild caught, and it's basically smoke and mirrors to trick people into thinking they're supporting a wild, sustainable industry, when in fact, it's the industry that's destroying our life here. So I don't want to get too political. Maybe I'll just stop there, because I could go down a long road.
Well, we won't get political, but I think people do want to know. Like, we go to Whole Foods, or I go to Whole Foods or whatever, to the grocery store, and I get salmon. You can't always make the best choices, but if you do want to make a best choice, is there a best choice? I assume that's just wild, or don't eat salmon.
Well,
It's about local.
Yeah, the bad thing about it, Joe, is I hate to hurt the good Alaskan fishermen that are out there doing the right thing and depending on wild fish. Because if you just quit eating all Alaskan salmon, then you're going to hurt those guys, those families out there in, the Aleutian Islands and Bristol Bay. But at the same time, if we don't stop the hatchery production, I guess what I would leave it at is the pollock industry has a tremendous amount of bycatch, and they catch a lot of salmon and they catch a lot of other species that just get dumped overboard, wasted. And the hatchery production is impacting the food availability for all species out in the marine environment right now. So those are the two things that are really impacting us. And wild caught labeled salmon from Alaska and pink salmon from Alaska are a big no-no in my view.
I think that's helpful.
Leave it at that.
People can probably do, more online research and more research, but maybe I'm sure people would love to hear from you at another point about your thoughts on that. And I'm reading the comments, and people are saying how informative this is, and how, there's stuff that they don't know. I mean, these people are obviously fans of the show and want to, but we have limited time, and I wrote down like 15 questions. I'm like 15 questions behind. So
okay, so we'll quit rambling and we'll go through questions. and fans questions.
I'll get to an easy question, or two easy questions, one for Denise, one for Andy. The Denise question is, Denise, are you from Canada?
Yes, I am from Canada. Born and raised in Canada, born in Alberta. I went to school in Vancouver, British Columbia. We have a family farm up in Saskatchewan. And then I traveled. As soon as I graduated university, I started to travel, and I went south, and I went way south. And then I stopped, kind of came back up and went into Florida. I went down into South America for a long time, and then came up and rooted in Florida for a while until I pulled up and came here. But I am from Canada.
And question, Andy, or for Andy or Denise, but just about snow conditions. How much snow did you get? Might as well then follow that, which, not to get again too political, but talk about snow now, and then curious if there are other things you're noticing, whether it's climate change or just different in weather patterns. And people are asking about climate change and how that's affected you guys outside of the salmon.
Yeah, no, climate change is a huge thing. I'm a kind of a student of nature here. I've been observing it for 35, 40 years here in the Eagle area, and I pay a lot of attention to that. The two previous years, we had tremendous snowfalls almost record snowfalls. That's one of the reasons why we had to abandon our property about a year ago at breakup time. It was just a fast thaw and the ice wasn't ready to go. What I've noticed as our biggest climate change here is that the seasons are shifting. So fall is staying warmer into the early winter months by about 2.5 weeks. And winter is generally, in most years, protracting longer into the springtime. So oftentimes we have cold nights longer in the spring. And what that does is it doesn't rot the ice out on the Yukon River as quick from the snow and water laying on it. And then when it finally does hit the point where it stays warm, above freezing, I should say, 24/7, all that snow was coming out of the hills really quick. And then the river ice was still pretty secure. And that's what causes really bad breakups. The other thing I'm noticing is that the animal movements are changing now. Moose are going into rut later. It used to be that, mid-September was a good time to shoot a moose because they weren't in rut yet. What I'm noticing now is those moose are protracting a little bit longer into the late September to really go into rut. The other thing that's really impacting us right now is the caribou herd is declining as well. So the two food sources that we have always relied on the most that were consistent were salmon and caribou. And we've lost all of our salmon and the caribou are in a decline. Some of that is due to climate change. Caribou live mostly on lichen up in the high country, and lichen reproduces extremely slow, and the herds aren't migrating as much. They're staying more in a central area between Eagle and Fairbanks in the mountains, the high mountains. And so they're kind of overgrazing the land. And so the cows aren't as fat, the babies aren't, the calves aren't as healthy when they're born. And so the survival rate isn't good for them. So the herd has declined from 80,000 to about 29,000 in about 3 years. And we're really concerned about that. I was just in meetings at Fairbanks working on that issue last week. So, things are pretty tough here. One of the things you have to understand when you live this lifestyle is you have to adapt.
Right.
It's all about adapting. Every year is going to be a little bit different. We live in what we have always called hungry country. There are animals here, but it's not rich country. You have to work for them, and you have to be pretty skilled at getting them. And when we lose things like the caribou and the salmon, which were kind of a no-brainer for us every year, that's really changing how we're finding our food for ourselves. Fortunately, I've been doing it for a long time, so I've kind of developed the skills and kind of know where to go. Anyway,
He kind of has some skills.
so anyway, yeah, the climate change is impacting Alaska. The tundra is thawing up in the north slope. It's releasing a lot of heavy metals into the water systems. All that ice locks up a lot of heavy metals, mercuries, and other things, and those are now going into the streams, which is also impacting fish and other wildlife. So climate change is happening very fast in the northern latitudes, and it's definitely impacting the ecosystem in a big way.
Yeah, people are asking a lot about that and suggesting, Andy, that either maybe you write a book or that we do another video where we focus on those kinds of issues and talk about salmon. People are myself included, would love to know. But like I said, let's jump through some of these questions. People are asking about building and heavy machinery. Obviously on the show, they've seen you with some, the bulldozer and those kinds of things. People want to know how do you get it out there and how do you do heavy machinery building?
Yeah, well, one of the unique things about living in the bush is everybody designs their own way of living out there. Everybody has their dream of how they want to live out there. And when I first came into this country, like I said, there was no power. People lived with candles, and I watched a lot of the families that lived really far out in the bush. And the two things I learned from that is the farther you get away from a place, the more difficult it is to live there. the more challenging it is and the more simplistic you have to live, which is good. But it also, as you get older or as you have a family, a lot of times that was kind of the catalyst for what made people leave the country. So two things would cause people to leave the country. One, they were too remote and it was just too difficult to live out there, with no money, basically just living with the land. And the second thing is you get hurt. You hurt your back. There's a lot of heavy work when you live out in the bush. And if you're not careful and you hurt your back or you break a leg or you mess up your shoulder or whatever, life gets real hard here real quick. And so when I finally decided to kind of move out of Eagle and pick my place, I wanted a place that was on the Yukon River so that I had pretty good access to it, preferably downriver, because you can float a lot of weight downriver. You can't float it upriver.
It wouldn't look like this here if you lived
Yeah.
upriver.
If I lived
You go-
upriver, there'd be one little cabin and a shitter and maybe a shed and a sauna. But anyway, I realized that, being a little bit closer to town, having good access on the Yukon River was really important. And then the other thing that I've always embraced is I'm kind of a tool junkie. You may have noticed on the show, I have welding equipment and every woodworking tool made to man, whether it's powered or hand tool. And it's just, I'm a builder and I'm a creator. That's what I love about my life out here, is it gives me a lot of opportunities to invent things and create things and build the life that I want to have here. And that machinery that I have has made that possible without messing up my back. And so the bulldozer I bought, when I first bought this property, I went up to Dawson City, about 100 miles upriver from Eagle, and I found an old bulldozer. And I had these old army boats, pontoon boats that they build for bridges to cross rivers. I had 4 of those and I stuck them together and I bought this bulldozer, and I'd never driven a bulldozer in my life. I'd never even sat in one. And I bought this thing and the guy delivered it on a flatbed truck down by the river. And he said, "Well, there you go." And I said, "Well, can you drive it off the truck for me?" And he goes, "No, it's your bulldozer." And I said, "Okay, can you show me how to start it and what each pedal does?" And so he basically gave me a cliff notes on what lever does what and what pedal does what. And I drove it off of that and drove it onto this raft that I built. And I was pretty nervous about it because the backhoe and the bulldozer was 29,000 pounds of steel and iron. And if I made a mistake, it was going to be 29,000 pound anchor in the Yukon River. And anyway, I got it on there and everything looked good. And I actually pushed it downriver with a small boat I had. Took about 24 hours to push it down to Eagle. And then the following day, I pushed it down to Calico Bluff, and I landed and I drove it off the pontoon boat kind of thing that I built, the raft. And I had a big cut bank. It was about a 15-foot high cut bank. And the very first thing I had to do was figure out how to operate that bulldozer and the backhoe and create a ramp. And then I drove it up onto the ramp, and it's been here ever since. And so that was probably the toughest thing to bring down here. The tractor was probably the next toughest thing, and I was able to put that on my boat. Tie a couple boats together, build a platform, and it only weighed a couple thousand, I don't know, maybe 3,000 pounds. So that's pretty light.
Remember when we brought the pig down?
Yeah.
I was so worried about that, how we're going to do a pig, but I mean, after a bulldozer, that's nothing. I get all worked up about things and then I realize, oh, well, okay. How many thousands of pounds of steel you did that? So
The funnest thing I ever brought down, though, Joe, was my Jeep Cherokee. That was my very first vehicle. You guys filmed me starting that, but
that
I
hunk
brought
of junk, I called it.
I brought that down. That was the very first brand new vehicle I ever bought in my life. I think I was 19 years old. I was a carpenter and I was making half decent money in the Washington DC area. And I was so proud when I bought that. And I got in that and drove to Alaska when I decided to move up here. And then one year, a friend of mine, I was floating the Yukon River with my best friend from Whitehorse down to Eagle. That was the year I moved to Eagle. And I had a friend who was supposed to drive it from Whitehorse back to Anchorage, and they rolled the vehicle on the highway. And when I showed up in Eagle after a beautiful 2.5 week float, the person was sitting in a bench at Eagle. And I said, "What are you doing here?" And they said, "I got some bad news for you." And they had rolled my vehicle. And yeah, anyway, that was a fun thing because I took it down in the winter. I put chains on it. I drove it down on the Yukon River ice, got stuck a bunch of times, had to build some boards to drive it up on. And basically I had two big sets of like boards that were the width of the tires. And I had two sets and I'd drive it onto that. They were 16 foot long. And then I'd take the other set and put it in front of it and drive another 16 feet and then put the other one in front of it. And I had to do that for 1.5 miles to get through all the deep snow. And then I finally got to where there was just more or less ice on the river. And I just put it in gear and went like hell. And when I hit the Yukon River bank, at my place, there was a bunch of jumble ice, and I went airborne, and the battery came flying out into the fan, but I made it. And the Jeep was here on the property, and I used it a fair amount, and then I parked it for almost 10
A
years.
long time.
And then-
I didn't even realize it was actually a vehicle because stuff was growing out of it.
Yeah, we had a 2-inch diameter birch tree growing up through the floorboard, up through the steering column, and I had to cut that out. But that thing, you guys filmed it. It was great. That thing, no kidding. I cleaned out the gas tank, cleaned out the carburetor, poured new gas in the gas tank, put a new battery in, poured a little bit of gas in the carburetor, and it started on the second crank. It was unbelievable.
Crazy.
That's
So,
incredible.
and that thing still runs.
You might be able to see it. You might be able to see it in the background. I don't know if you move.
So
It's,
I love that episode. I remember thinking like, there's no way that thing's gonna start.
oh, I was that was back in the day when I used to think, no way, Andy. Now I just like, okay.
and that wasn't staged at all. And what you saw was what really happened. I was so blown away by that. But anyway, that was those were some of the big things that I brought down here. But we brought a lot of welders and tons of building.
And always his go-to phrase, he mentioned it in that story, was, "And what do you do in a pinch? You go like hell," which actually got me in some trouble. That was my first time when I had to go up on the snow machine. Well, or that was after. Why? Oh, that's when you hurt your hip, and I had to get back. I had to get to Eagle. He told me just take the snow machine, and we had the coffin sled behind it, and he was kind of I'd never done that before, gone up there, and you have to go around kind of some treacherous stuff in the winter. There's around the bluff up there and open leads and open water, and he's naming it and describing it to not go where the open water is. And he said, if you come around the bluff and you hit this ice or whatever, Mission Creek, I wasn't even sure where Mission Creek was. And he just said, if you get into trouble, just go like hell. So I got into trouble. I came around there and I did get into trouble. The whole back of the machine started to cave into the water. So I went like hell.
And she made it. Bottom line, she made it.
Yeah, after I flipped the machine, that's always your how to get everything here and how to make it happen. Just go forward.
Yep.
That kind of explains a lot. Norma and Patty are asking kind of a similar question for Andy about your background in terms of, out there and on the show, we've seen you be a carpenter, an electrician. We've seen you build houses from scratch. We've seen you build an elevator, I think a couple elevators, build a yurt, build all kinds of stuff. Do you have a background in that, or is it just kind of like learn as you go, like you do with the bulldozer?
Yeah, no, it's kind of a learn as you go. I mean, when I got my senior year of high school, I did a work program and I worked in a cabinet shop. So I've always been really interested in woodworking and just creating things, learning new skills, I guess is really the best way to describe it. When I was a young boy, I read the Foxfire books, which were a series of books based on Appalachian life in the deep Appalachian Mountains. I think when I was 10 years old, I built my first bow and arrow just out of an oak staff growing in my backyard. I kind of lived in a wooded area in suburbia, Washington, D.C. It was kind of a unique area, pretty wooded. And but I've always just been into learning skills. And I can remember going out and learning how to butcher a pig, go out to Virginia and they had a demonstration on how to butcher pigs. And I've just always loved learning new skills. And then when I got out of high school, I worked for a really great contractor. It was a small company. There was just myself and a superintendent, and they taught me all types of carpentry work, everything from surveying land. They built office parks, and so I worked from scratch, just clearing land in McLean, Virginia. Learned how to shoot surveys, learned how to lay out sewers, with transit and levels. Learned electrical work, plumbing work, brickwork, roofing, everything, and then it just set me up with a really base of skills to come up to Alaska. And I've always said, the more you can do, the more you can do. It's that simple. So the more basic skills you get, it doesn't matter what the skill is, it adds to your potential. And so I've never shied away from, if I have some harebrained idea, to just give it a shot. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Most of the times it kind of works a little bit. And then you have those aha moments of, how do you make it better? How do you make it work better next time? And, as you go through life and you do that all the time, you just learn how to recognize how to improve things and modify them. And you also learn what not to do. And that's a big part of my life out here is when I watch Denise do things, the first year or two, it was always not how to do something, it was how not to do something. Because the first thing I learned about Denise is we're different. I'm strong in the upper body. She's not. She's got really strong legs and that's what she uses. And so everybody uses their body a little bit differently. And I had to learn not to how to teach her how to do something because the way I did it didn't work for her. But I had to always instruct her on how not to do something so she didn't get hurt or didn't get into trouble. So, the bottom line, the more you can do, the more you can do. And I love to create. And
Well, and I think too, with you, you don't hesitate to try.
yeah,
Even-
no,
It's just how your brain is always exploring things. Like,
Yeah.
look at when you were sick and then you were in Florida. He would just look around. He looked around and was like, what are those trees? What kind of tree? What is that? Oh, next thing you know, he was making stuff out of the bamboo. He's got bamboo flutes, bamboo cups. He made a big trailer. He made a boat in Florida when he was supposed to, when you were recovering out of what was there, so it's that confidence to just explore it and do it.
the best lessons learned, Joe, are by mistakes. If you do everything perfect your whole life, you never learn anything. So that's just what I live by. And I've made a lot of mistakes, but you learn from them. That's okay. As long as it doesn't kill you, it's okay to make a mistake.
I think, well, it's also convenient that you have a nurse there just in case you do get injured.
Exactly. I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for having a nurse for a girlfriend. I guarantee you that. I was at the pearly gates there at one point in time, and without her, I would have stepped through that gate.
Well, we have like about 5 or 10 more minutes and we'll start to wrap things up. But one of the things we want to talk about is the show ending, or at least ending for now, as we like to say. Do each of you have any thoughts on the show and wrapping up and what it's meant and the fans or any sort of looking back on filming Life Below Zero and being on Life Below Zero?
A lot. I think
Yeah.
we
We talk about it a lot,
keep going into that.
yeah,
'cause
it's been a great chapter in life. We'd love to continue it. We're really hoping that someone else picks up the show. For me, I think from my perspective, what I really loved about the show was exposing people to a different way of living and to show people that you can live differently than in a concrete jungle. There's nothing wrong with a concrete jungle, but it's not for everyone. And if you want to make a change, you can do it. And it's just a matter of, planning and work. And And so, for me doing the show and hopefully, teaching people things from my experience and exposing them to a different lifestyle, that's what made me happy. That's why I ended up deciding to do the show. It wasn't, quite honestly, I don't give a damn about fame or anything like that. We get recognized a lot, and it's always a little bit of an uncomfortable feeling for me. Took me a while to kind of get used to that, but I'm just Joe Blow living in the bush. But um, I think the show has been a really great chapter in our lives. We'd really like to continue it. I've been thinking about a lot of different things. I'd really love to continue filming the things that I do here, maybe posting them on YouTube or working with you guys or whatever to do that, because I think there's a need for that. A lot of people think that everything that you do in life can be done on a phone. And when you live this lifestyle, and even if you live in suburbia, man, just learning some basic skills allows you to do more with your life and do it less costly. Let's face it, it's expensive as heck to live out in, quote, the other world. So anything you can do for yourself is a really good asset to have in these economic times. So
You have so many skills to share and
Yeah.
so many things. I know when I go back to work, there's so many basic things that I've learned from here that are so applicable there.
Yeah.
And
She's a
there's
damn good chainsaw runner now. That's one thing she's really gotten good at. I see her run into the shed and grab the chainsaw, and I listen to it for the next hour or two. So, you know.
I think one of the things, and I started to talk about it earlier, is just the having the contact with the crew here, and sharing what's here.
Yeah.
I feel like we were talking about it, how I have to like, oh, wow, look at where I am. Look at this. I still sometimes it's so striking to me that it's real. This is part of the world we all live in too. And I just want to share that with people.
Yeah.
And I felt like when the crew was here, I could share it with them. And the thought of it being shared out to the viewers, to me, is just huge.
Yeah.
That's kind of something I've always, I think with pictures, I've always been striving. You want to share your experiences. You want to pass them around to people. You want to bring your family in. And that's what the show enabled me to do, is to share it.
Yeah. Positive impacts on people. And that's what I really loved about the show is bringing, some really positive impacts for people and giving them something to dream about. And, some of them have come up here. I've met people in Fairbanks that said they moved to Alaska because of life below zero. And that makes me feel good. And so, moving forward, we're set up pretty good here. We can live here and live off the land, live with the land, I should say. I'm getting more and more into wanting to explore more of the artistic side of me. I've always wanted to learn how to build rocking chairs, and I always loved doing my lapidary work, making jewelry and those sorts of things. The house is finished on the outside, but there's a lot of furniture to build on the inside. So, we'll be doing things like that, but I would really love to continue to do some filming on just some of the things in our life here. We're starting our woodcutting season now, and logging and milling and all that. And those are all, those are things that are just to really get my juices going. I love doing that stuff.
And how can people stay in touch? Andy, I know you're not too much into social media. Denise, you're on it a little bit. How can people stay in touch with you guys or reach out or connect?
I mean, I should just be better at
Yeah.
the basics. I do have an Instagram account, Facebook Instagram accounts that I'm not active on them.
Yeah.
But people do message me sometimes through those, and probably that's what I need
Yeah.
to do
And
to
then,
stay connected.
like our patch says, the Alaska Yukon Adventure, we still keep that website going. So I'm not real good at,
Yeah, it's
I'm-
better for me on Instagram.
yeah, I'm just not a computer guy. I mean, I can do it when I need to. I have to do it for certain things, but I'd rather spend my time in the woods. I do get contacts from people and letters from people, and I try and answer, but honestly, I'm not very good at it. But
So should I just say Instagram? I am on Instagram, Denise Becker. I mean, it's it's
yeah,
who I am, Denise Becker at Life Below Zero, and I'll make an effort now that our internet is better.
that's the other thing. You know, we did do a thing a couple of years ago on Earth Day. We did about a 12-day filming where we went out every day and we filmed the Yukon River breakup during that time frame,
That
the
was
birds
done.
coming back and all that. And we had a lot of fun doing that, but it was a lot of work, you know, a lot of time to film every day and then edit it and then post it. And we had really crappy internet then. But maybe we can get into doing something like that again and show more about kind of the, I guess you would call them behind the scenes type stuff, but the everyday life, you know?
Well, this has been wonderful. There's still a lot more questions, so maybe we'll try to do some more of these in the near future. And I think definitely people are interested in a deeper dive, in terms of sustainability, in terms of fishing, and just knowing how they can help, or even just knowing the knowledge of what they can do. And I know Denise, a lot of people have just really enjoyed watching you on the show. I always I'm very grateful for everyone, of course, but you're in an interesting case because you just appeared on the show, basically. You were there one day and started to become a big part of it. And we were able to learn so much about you, and then also learn a lot about Andy through you. And then, of course, learn about that lifestyle. A lot of us were you in terms of watching you learn and adapt and be there. So you guys have been, an incredible part of the show. And Andy, it's been 12 years of teaching, and people are commenting on how much they just enjoy you teaching and sharing. So hopefully we can keep working on something. Hopefully somebody will pick up the show and people will reach out. But I just wanted to say thank you for doing this and for all of the Life Below Zero stuff.
Yeah, and thank you to,
Yeah,
you, Joe,
that's
and
like
all the crew that worked. And, really, none of this would have happened if the people wouldn't have been engaged in the program. And so for all the people that are out there that were faithful at watching it, or even if they just stopped in from time to time, that's what kept it going. And that's what made it meaningful. And we're low on battery power, so
it
what
says,
good
hang on,
timing.
hang on.
I think that's good timing. So we'll say bye for now. Thank you,
You know,
thank you everyone.
Joe, and this is actually a really good way if people do, want to hear more, and this is good for us because it just feels natural with you. And that's been the thing with Life Below Zero for me right from the beginning. It's a natural flow. It's real. It's what it is. I mean, this is our life. This is what we do. And, you have a way of bringing that out. So
Yep. We'll be happy to do more of these with you. I'd love to talk about our natural resources and climate change. That's a big part of my life right now.
I think it'll be really fun. Thank you both for doing this. And
Bye.
I hope people watch tonight. This is the series finale. For now, we're gonna do another live with Sue pretty soon after this. And Andy and Denise are on the finale. Depending upon where you're at, it's coming up in a couple hours. So thanks everyone for watching Life Below Zero, and of course, thanks for watching this. Bye, everybody.